Welcome to Cafe Grit. My name is Beth Campbell, and I am the author of Where the Hell is My Bacon?, a book about a corporate team that triumphed over shitty leadership with the help of fried pork. I open Cafe Grit as a place where you can join me in figuring out how to channel your grit and find your voice in the world, whatever that means for you. This is the place to go when you've got the hankering for purpose, the taste for fulfillment, and you're tired of living the rat race. Thanks for stopping in. Cafe Grit is now open for service. Hey everybody, welcome to Cafe Grit. I'm your host, Beth Campbell. This is a place to go when you've got a hankering for purpose, a taste for fulfillment, and you are tired of living the rat race. Thank you all for joining and for listening. Before we start off today's episode, I want to just show my appreciation. I've been doing this podcast for now off and on about 3 years, and it really started as a passion that I still have very, very strongly about good leadership and channeling your grit and speaking out and leaning in, however that works for you. That doesn't always necessarily mean verbally, but I just wanted to thank you because, I'm out here. It's not like I'm making $1 million on this. I'm making $0 doing this. I do this because I love it and because I'm passionate about things. And as with many things in our lives and in my life, it has evolved. I was very angry at times about things that had gone on in the corporate world, my corporate world and others' corporate world, because sometimes people don't have a voice or can't find their voice, or they're afraid to use their voice. And so this is why I'm here, to help you do that. So thank you. Thank you for sticking with me, my 12 followers. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the feedback. And if there's anything that you think I should talk about on the Cafe Grit podcast, and really there are almost no topics that are off subject, off limits for me, let me know. Check me out. Reach out. You can go to my website, bethancampbell.com. That's Ann with an E. All of my social media links are there, or you can fill out a contact sheet. Or send me an email, that kind of thing. And just let me know what you'd like me to talk about. So today I'm just going to jump right in to the topic, which is the grit of my mother. I really have not appreciated what a badass my mom was until well into adulthood. Really, I was in my late 40s when I really started. It's just been very recently where I've really started to look back and realize all the things that my mom taught me without even knowing that she was teaching me, but just what a badass she was, and really didn't appreciate when I was young, and even in my younger adulthood, all of the things that she did that kind of really channeled her grit in some way. So in the context of mother-daughter relationships, and that's what I'm going to talk about today, there are many parent-child relationships out there, many dynamics, mother-son, father-daughter, and then you start getting into, all kinds of other aspects about ourselves where we don't fall perfectly into a mother, a daughter, son, father kind of a relationship. But I am a daughter, and I had a mother, and like many women, our relationship was complicated. It was not complicated. It was complex. And I kind of feel like, just from knowing many people with mothers, many women with mothers, including 2 of my own sisters, where we shared a mother, and then other people who have mothers and have various relationships. I kind of feel like there are 3 sort of main categories of mother-daughter relationships. Generally speaking, of course, I'm very much generalizing this. Don't throw the hate mail at me. So 3 general areas or types of relationship that I see. You've got, on the one end of the spectrum, you've got the women who are best friends with their mom. I see this on TikTok a lot. I've, heard some of my friends say it, and that's great. My mom is my best friend, and they have great relationships with their moms. They shop together. They do things together. They vacation together. I love that. I don't have that. I didn't have that type of relationship with my mom, but I do appreciate when women and their daughters and women and their mothers are able to have those kinds of really close relationships. The other end of the spectrum would be women who don't have good relationships with their mom at all, or maybe no relationship, and often for very good reason. I know many people who, have those big challenges with their mothers. And sometimes we're talking about abuse and all kinds of not nice or positive things that cause women and their mothers from either side, depending, to not have relationships or not have good relationships. In the middle of those two ends of the spectrum, I think probably most women fall. We have some varying degree of a decent to good relationship with our mothers, but it's complex. And that is where I fall. I loved my mother very, very much. I would say we had a pretty close relationship. My whole family, just to give you a little bit of background on, my mother and where she came from. So my mother got married very young. She had 4 children in 5.5 years, 65, 67, 68, 69. And her husband, my father, passed away unexpectedly. And then about 5 years later, she remarried, and that man brought a son to the relationship. And then they had 2 children together. So there were 7 children total. I was number 2. So I had an older brother, and then it was me, younger brother. So, on down the line. So there were 4 of us initially, and then a blended family several years after that. And I got along pretty well with my mom. I would not say that in my childhood we had the most affectionate, close relationship. I mean, and I don't think has anything to do with either one of us. My mother had a lot of kids to take care of, and eventually went back to work. And I just tend to be a little bit aloof sometimes, or as my mother used to call me, non-committal. So, but we had a pretty good relationship, right? And as I got older, there's always there's this period of time where you just hate your parents anyways. And I think they've actually scientifically studied this, that it is around 13 to 24. I'm going to tangent off a little bit because I just love science and biology and, all the sciences. And I just think this is really fascinating that they're now believing that the reason that teenagers are so anti-parent and resistant to anything a parent says, and then eventually, and I've said this even before the study came out, that just wait until they get into their mid-20s, and because that's what happened to me. I was very resistant, protest, didn't want to hear anything my parents had to say, didn't think anything they had to say was valid or logical or made any sense. They were just stupid. And that is because we evolved so that our primary, our best, biologically speaking, certainly not psychologically or socially speaking, but biologically speaking, we are at our most fertile from around age 13 to 24. Now, again, we don't like 13-year-olds to be, procreating, but I'm just saying biologically, evolutionarily, that's the truth. And so from 13 to 24, roughly speaking, we have basically evolved to not listen to anything our parents have to say, not believe anything our parents have to say, and not even want to be around our parents in many cases. Because it was actually better, it is more genetically diverse if we leave the clan at that time. So if in, hundreds of thousands of years ago, it was parents, you suck, I'm going to go off and find my way elsewhere. And so I would go and provide a genetic variation to some other clan versus in interbreeding more in my own clan. At least that is the theory. And as with science, theories always change when there's new evidence. But right now I'm fascinated by that. Anyway, so I would say I had a, because my mother is passed away, I had a decent to good relationship with my mother. I loved her very much. We did many things together. She traveled to Europe with me when I graduated from college. She was in many ways very generous, loving, and just a wonderful human being. She was very vivacious and social, and a lot of people loved her. And she would also, as I was got into my late 20s and 30s, we started to have some really interesting conversations about things like religion. Like my mother believed that aliens came down and had something to do with the evolution of human beings, which I thought was fascinating because my mother she just really never really talked a lot about that kind of stuff. So that was a period after that, I hate my parents period. So we had a great time. We did things together. I visited her often. She was the hub of our family. And then there were also times when I could not stand to be in the same room with her for no valid reason. Just her presence drove me fucking mad. And there were other little things. She like many mothers and grandmothers, her love was her food. And so we had issues sometimes with her. She would often try to feed her children, even when her children did not desire to be fed. And God knows, skipping a meal for me is not an issue. But often it was I had already eaten, and I would come visit my mother, and she would try to push food, and it would escalate because I would just keep saying no and no thank you, and it would escalate until we had, the voices and the tones got a little heated. It almost became a little mother-daughter pissing contest. But I loved my mother very much. When I was growing up, there were things that my mom did and how she raised us and how she and I interacted that I moderately resented until well into my adulthood. Really, only in the last, like I said, the last few years have I come to an appreciation. But for many, many years, well into my adulthood, I had a mild resentment of some of the things. There were things that I perceived or believed that made me think my mom was not being nice or being a bitch, or I resented it, or I just didn't understand why she would do. I would see other parents do things differently. I would wonder, why would she do it this way? As an example, this is my favorite example. My mother would never do my dirty work for me. What I mean by that is, if I wanted to quit something, let's say so the first thing I can remember as a child was I wanted to take ballet lessons. I think my cousins were taking ballet and I wanted to take ballet. So we got signed up for this lady not too far from us. I remember her name, Lana Little. She was so lovely. Here's what I love about Lana Little. She was not a skinny ballerina instructor or a dance instructor. She was a curvaceous woman. And I remember, and so she really kind of gave me a very early example of, you don't have to be skinny to be graceful in dance. Because until then, all of the ballerinas I'd ever seen, including my cousins who were very fit and lovely, I'd only ever seen skinny dancers on TV or on the Lawrence Welk show, when you would see dancers that were all very skinny and fit. And Lana Little was very curvy. And I remember one of our recitals, she did a toe dance. And I just remember thinking, wow, you don't have to be 90 pounds and, 5'8" in order to be a beautiful dancer. So thank you, Lana Little, for that. She was a very nice lady. And I think if I remember, I was very young, I enjoyed taking dance lessons. But at some point, after a couple of years, I wanted to quit. I have a theory. I'll talk about that some other time, but I wanted to quit. Nothing horrible was happening. It was just, I didn't want to do it anymore. Maybe it was getting challenging. I don't know. That's usually me. I usually try to play it safe because that's how I am sometimes, or in some areas of my life. Not always the rebel, people. No, I'm not always the badass rebel, right? And I wasn't when I was 7 or 8 years old. Anyway, I wanted to quit. And any other person who I'd known and throughout my life, I have seen many examples of mothers and fathers coming to the rescue of their kids. they show up at school because, oh my God, my kid got a bad grade on a test and we want it changed. And even, yes, even Gen Xers, even our parents, our boomer parents, sometimes were a little helicopter, but not my mom. My mom said, if you want to quit, that's great. I support that. You don't have to do that if you don't want to, but I'm not going to quit for you. And I was mortified. She wanted me to call Lana Little, my dance instructor, and quit myself. I was probably 8 years old. So it was very, very uncomfortable, but I did it because I had no choice. She was not going to do this for me. The same MO happened many times later in life. I wanted to switch band instruments. I played the oboe for a couple of years, and I really, after I saw our high school, this was when I was in junior high, and we had a concert where the high school band had a jazz band piece, and I just decided I wanted to be in the jazz band because they were so fucking cool. And so I wanted to switch to the saxophone. Again, my mother was not going to do it for me. You can do what you want. I'll support that, but you have to do the dirty work. I'm not going to call your band teacher and say and plead with them to change you from the oboe that we just spent $300 on to a saxophone. I had to do it. Same thing with piano. I wanted to take piano lessons, so I found a piano teacher, was taking piano lessons. Probably it got a little challenging, or I was probably now in late elementary or early junior high and was getting caught up with, junior high life. And so I wanted to quit. Again, my mother would not do this for me. And you may think that this is a little thing, but I will tell you again, there were a lot of parents that would absolutely, yes, I'll do the dirty work for you. So I had many, many instances of throughout my life where my mother would not come to my quote rescue. Now, I don't mean to portray my mother as somebody who is not supportive. Absolutely, she was. But in these instances where I just decided I didn't want to do something, and there was a little bit of belligerence, probably a little fear, my mother, probably without even knowing she was doing so, was putting me in a position of discomfort. And as we know, discomfort is the herald of opportunity. Thank you, Jason Seib, for that great quote. Discomfort is the herald of opportunity. Failure equals growth. And being uncomfortable and having to go through that helps us to grow. It helps us to become accustomed to other types of discomfort. The more you put yourself in an uncomfortable position or situation, the easier it is the next time you do it. So without even knowing so, because I'm convinced my mother did not deliberately do this, but she unknowingly, probably just based on a badass mother instinct, put me in the positions where I had to take responsibility and accountability and ownership of the decisions that I made in my life. And I did not recognize or appreciate this until very recently. And once it did kind of click in my mind, I thought, wow, because I've often asked myself, how is it that I am comfortable leaning in? I'm comfortable using my voice. I'm comfortable failing. I recognize that failure is a part of growth. We will not grow unless we fail and make mistakes. And it's how I try to live my life, and it's how I've tried to lead when I've been in leadership positions, like at work. How did I get this? How did I develop this comfort with discomfort or comfort with failure? And I believe that the way my mother interacted and treated us was a big, big, big part of that. And I didn't even recognize it until I was much older. So thanks, Mom, for that. There were other things too, like when I was younger, and I'm sure every kid out there who's going to shake their head and go, look, this is just part of being a child. I get it. But I perceived that my mother favored my brothers. I don't think that was true, but for many, many years, decades, I believed that my mother, just things that she would do. If we would get in a fight, she would always go after my brother. And there were things that he did, and it just seemed like my perception, again, this is my truth. It's not anybody else's in my family's truth. That my truth was that she favored my brothers. Now in my adulthood, now that I am in my glory years and have awakened and just have had a chance to think about things from the context of grit and persistence and badassedness, I don't think she favored my brothers at all. I think my mother just knew she didn't have to worry about me. Now, there is an aspect of this, and I wrote about this in my book, From Blah to Badass, about how to be a better leader. There is an aspect of don't forget your superstars. And I'm not claiming like I was a superstar and my brothers were not at all, not at all. But I was a good student. I got straight A's. I didn't get in trouble. When my mom passed away, she had kept everything. She was borderline hoarder, and she had a file cabinet that had a file for each of her kids, really a drawer, a whole drawer for each of her kids. And you would look in my file and it would just be proficiency. We get these little proficiency forms periodically, like, oh, Beth is such a pleasure to work with, right? Because I was just, I loved school. I loved studying. I loved math. I loved science. I loved English. And I didn't cause any problems. I never got in trouble. I never got in fights, mostly, at least that she was aware of. There was that whole incident with one of my friends in third grade when we got in trouble for double swinging on the swings, but that's about the extent of my trouble that I got into in high school or elementary or middle school. So you look in my file and it would be all those kinds of things like honor roll, that kind of thing. And then if you looked at my brothers would be got kicked off the bus again, suspended, and I know they had to walk or ride their bikes to school a lot. There were many, many reasons for that. Not the least of which is I had a strong role model female, my mother, in my life from day one, and my brothers did not. My brothers eventually did, but it was, they had gone through some formative years without having a father in the household. So of course, there are many reasons why my brothers maybe acted out and I didn't. And we are all very, very close today. So I just want to let you know, I speak of my brothers as children, that these are things that children do. I wasn't perfect either. Believe me, there were things that I did that I'm not proud of, but I know that they had reasons, why they did the things that they did and probably why they got in trouble. And plus, sometimes just as they say, boys will be boys. But anyway, for whatever reason, I perceived that my mother favored my brothers. But I really think now that that's where she had to spend her time. And rightly so. That is where she needed to put her energy. I don't think she intended to make me feel, or for me to feel like I was not as deserving of her attention, as much of her attention as I ended up getting. But I was also, as I look back, I read a lot. So I was kind of on my own, or I was off playing with friends, very independent. And so any of the conflicts that we got into when at the time when she would maybe go console my brother, and I would be left thinking, well, wait a minute, he started it, right? I now know that a lot of those are just childhood things, but also my mother probably felt like, that she had to spend more time with them because there was a sense of them being more troubled than I was. So that was another interesting thing, that, again, just realizing how my mother formulated how I grew up. I probably became more independent because of that, and again, please do not perceive that I am painting a picture of my mother as heartless, or that she didn't give affection, or that she was a very wonderful mother, a very neutral mother. One of the other things I really appreciate about my mother that really helped to formulate my mature wisdom self. My mother never pushed for any kind of religion. My mother was basically neutral. So her family background was heavily Lutheran, very strict. And of course, as with many people, the older generation, my grandmothers and grandparents were very her parents were regular churchgoers, particularly her mom, Lutheran. My mother did not go to church. My mother had the pastor from the Lutheran church who would come out to our house periodically, once or twice a year, and he would sit and have coffee with my mom, and he would try to convince her to go to church. And my mother was just very calmly, politely would refuse. And she never did. But my mother never discouraged us from following or experimenting or pursuing or investigating other religions beyond Lutheran or Christian. I don't know that my mother really considered herself a Christian, even though that was her background. Again, she thought aliens populated the earth, so she had some very interesting thoughts about religion and all things associated with religion. So, but she never discouraged anything. So I can tell you, when I was 16, I wanted to start going to a local church. My very close friend went there. They had this youth group that I was really, really excited about. She had invited me once or twice, and I just loved the energy of these very enthusiastic young people. Also, maybe I might have had a crush on somebody who ended up being gay. Story of my life. Thank you. That's a whole other podcast. But it was very theatrical, and I just really loved it. My mother was absolutely fine with it. She was neither discouraging nor overly enthusiastic, but you need to use the car to go to church on Sunday morning. Have at it. She was very encouraging. In my late 20s, I decided that I was going to be Wiccan. I really liked the whole nature aspect of religion. So for a couple of years, I practiced, witchcraft, Wicca. And again, my mother was perfectly fine with that. There was no discouraging, encouraging either way. She really didn't, if asked, she would certainly talk openly about things, but she would never, like a lot of parents do, they want you to follow their religion. Parents who are really religious want you to follow their religion. And sometimes when you don't, that causes problems. My older brother in the early 90s converted to Islam. So for the rest of his life until 2015, when he passed, he was a practicing Muslim. And again, my mother was perfectly fine with it. I really just think she was sort of neutral, and she never prevented, and was mildly encouraging in a supportive parent kind of way, but not overtly pushing in any given direction. And that somehow impacted me. I tend to be pretty secular, and I don't follow any religion. I don't participate in any religion, but I also understand and appreciate and am open and inclusive of people who are following any religion, no matter how devout they are, provided that they don't try to push their beliefs on me. So all of these things, and more. I mean, there's the aspect of my mother's unapologetically being late all the time, which fucking drove me nuts when I was growing up. And it almost became a family joke because she would never show up on time. But you know what? She was unapologetic about it. And I love that she was like, you know what? Screw you. Is this really as bad as you think it is because I show up 45 minutes late or an hour late? No, it really isn't. It certainly made me be very punctual, but I also kind of let up on that in my older years because I've come to appreciate that, you know what? Stop and smell the roses. The world's not going to end and crumble because somebody shows up late. And if you just own your shit, people will be very accommodating. So those and many other things about my mother. When I was a child, I resented, I didn't appreciate, frustrated me to no end. But now in my older years, as I am now getting to the point of where she was when I was becoming an adult in age, I appreciate those things so much more. And I realize how much grit my mother had and how much she really did help to formulate who I am. And I like who I am. I like being confident. I like being able to speak out. I like being a little bit rebellious. I like having passion for something and not giving a fuck. Like my mom didn't give a fuck about if I'm late, I'm late. I'm giving you a ride. You're going to appreciate it. If you don't, then you can walk home next time. So I kind of like that. And I appreciate more, so much more in my older age, in my glory years, all the things that my mother did teach me and help to become the person that I am today. So if you are out there and you have a relationship with your mother, and because again, there are spectrums, and I don't want to get into anybody's, people have reasons why they don't associate with their parents or have good relationship with their parents, and they're valid. You're fine. I'm not talking to you. But those of you who have those relationships with your parents where they are kind of complex, and I think a lot of women do have these relationships with their mothers. It's just something that you can almost not verbalize. It's like I talked about, sometimes I just couldn't stand being in the room with my mom. Think back now on some of those things that maybe you resented or didn't understand or got frustrated by, and just investigate, just look into them, think about them, and maybe try to put yourself in your mom's head. And again, not talking about abusive things. I'm talking about just the normal stuff that you go through that sometimes you just don't understand, and see if maybe you have a new understanding of where she was coming from. Because maybe like my mom, maybe she wasn't even intending, it was just some inherent thing, or maybe she was intentional and we just didn't appreciate it at the time. So that's my challenge to you. Thank you so much for listening today to this motherhood. I don't know if I mentioned it, but today is my mom's birthday. So that's why I decided to do a mom-based podcast. So happy birthday, Mom. She would have been 80 years old today. And for the rest of you, thank you so much for listening. Again, look me up. Let me know your ideas. And of course, as always, you and your mom, if she's alive, never forget you are a fucking badass. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Take it easy. Hey everybody, thank you for stopping by Cafe Grit, where the moxie is fresh, the passion cold brewed, and everything is served with a heaping side of mojo. For more Cafe Grit episodes, please check out bethancampbell.com/cafegrit. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider giving it a rating or review on YouTube, Buzzsprout, or your favorite streaming platform. I'll be forever grateful, and in return, I'll wish upon you copious amounts of bacon, your favorite hot beverage, and of course, pie. I'd love to connect and hear about your grit experiences as well. Please go to bethancampbell.com for links to all my social media. Cafe Grit is a product of Beth Ann Campbell, LLC, all rights reserved. Thanks again, and remember, you are a badass. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Take it easy.